even though you have freedom of speech, it does not mean you have freedom from responsibility of what those words do after you say them.
Hey everybody, welcome to today's episode of the Jeff Heilman Project. I'm Jessica Heilman, this is Jeff Heilman, and this is an episode where, or at least this is a show where we talk a little bit about everything. We're over 60 episodes now.
We talk about everything, and then we ask.
Yeah.
And like in the proverbial words of the great Jerry Seinfeld, is this anything?
Anything or nothing. So how was your week? First off, we always begin, if you're new to listening to us.
She asks me, how was your week on Tuesday?
Well, how's your week going?
It's a perfectly normal question to ask, considering the podcast ships on Friday. But there's like 3 days of mystery meat in between when we cut the episode.
Well, we could make this episode all about expectations if you want. How's your week?
How was last week between the weekend and the 2 days of this week since the last time? No, I'm just kidding.
It's been a week since we've been in the booth.
Yes.
So how was your week?
I'm trying to remember. It was Father's Day this last Sunday,
Father's
which
Day.
is super fun. It's like the Super Bowl in my family with 7 kids, and you guys were super nice to me. You took the kids and went to church. I had the day off of church that day and stayed home and worked on expenses for about 5 hours because I don't like expenses, and I had to keep putting my phone down.
If you want to just do them on Father's Day every year.
Yeah, they're once a year, whether I need to or not. So I got about halfway done.
You know it's bad when your manager starts saying, don't you have some expenses to file?
Yeah. Are you paying interest on the money that you're loaning us to build our company? Yes, as a matter of fact, I am.
Well,
Smithers.
let's see. We sat out by the pool. We have a little kiddie pool in the backyard. We sat out by the kiddie pool on Father's Day. We drove in the Jeep has no doors, and currently the roof is off.
You took me for a granny shake. What are those granny shakes at McDonald's?
Grandma McFlurry.
Grandma.
At McDonald's. If you have not tried it.
If you have a Grandma McFlurry, post it in the comments below if your last name is McFlurry.
No, it's a perfect blend of sea salt and caramel and it's soft serve vanilla.
I don't even want to admit how much I
butterscotch.
actually like those things. They're really good.
Yeah.
They have little crunchy crumblies.
I've learned
butterscotch
since those that have seen my weight loss journey, I've learned to order them for others and just get a commission.
Others.
Okay, here's your commission. You're going to give me a spoon. You're going to give me a bite.
You get a spoonful of Granny McFlurry.
Yeah, but anyway, so I just wanted to see how your week was on Father's Day. Nessie made you some art.
Good. Nessie made art, and we watched Rat Race.
Oh my God, you couldn't get through Rat Race.
I just don't like that much tension.
Oh my God, but it's
I have enough stress.
Funny when he's holding the heart and it's got the whole.
Oh, that was the part the human heart part. I won't spoil it for you, but it is a great movie that we watched. And I've been talking to people all week about Rat Race, and nobody's seen it.
Really?
It seems like one of those.
Andrew, what year was that? It was
2010.
Smash Mouth.
He'll put it in the comments below. But 2010,
2001.
maybe?
Yeah, no, it was
2001.
It's like
before
way
movies
old.
were invented.
I was thinking, like, when is it? Because they were doing things that we don't do anymore. Like, I mean, well, clearly they had no cell phones. Not even a single person had a cell phone. They didn't even have a flip phone.
They didn't even have flip phones. That's right.
That was
in the
one
movie.
thing.
They didn't talk about Blackberries.
No.
So it's like pre-BlackBerry. That's
and
almost.
they were still putting coins in the slot machine and pulling the art. Like they were walking around putting quarters in the machines.
Yeah,
and I'm like,
I remember putting quarters in the machine.
How old is this movie? Because I mean, I don't know when the casinos turned over to like the cards and the cash or whatever they do now, those vouchers and stuff. But man, you don't see many coins. I mean, it was the Venetian and they were doing the coin slots, so that you know it's old. But anyways. Funny movie. They couldn't, I'm sure in the politically correct environment today, they could not make that movie without being canceled.
No, they would have gotten canceled.
The actors themselves would have gotten canceled. It's probably not their most shining moments in theater, but so funny.
You got to be proud of making a movie like that, though. It was
so funny. But that's
good.
actually the topic of today's conversation. No, and I'm gonna, if you'll permit me to set the stage. I was telling a story the other day, and he said, "What's the point?" I'm like, "I'm telling a story. It's not supposed to have a point."
Yeah, you didn't tell me you were telling a story until you're like 6 minutes in, and by then I've got cobwebs in my eyes.
Okay.
I'm like rolling over.
So let me set the stage.
I wish you would.
There are two aspects of the topic. One is I was scrolling through Instagram the other night, and it just, the algorithms, they catch you. What do you get? You get like skateboarders and you get the police officers that pulling over.
Well, the last couple of weeks I've been getting all police officers because like DUIs, stun guns.
You watch one video.
Runs. I know, you watch one cop video and the next thing you know, everything. Have you been arrested? Do you need to post bail? Like the ads, everything's shifted to me being the axe murderer on the side of the freeway. And I'm sitting there going, maybe if I got pulled over by the cops, maybe I would run until they tase my ass. I don't know.
For whatever reason, you get those. I get my algorithms right now currently are doodles, the dogs, doodle dogs.
See, I never get doodles.
I get hacks like turn this into this,
turn your Pyrex into
a houseware hacks type stuff.
Yeah.
And I get, for whatever reason, conservative Christian pastors. So I don't know. Maybe,
I don't know where that
comes from. So I've been scrolling, and I'm seeing Russel Brand, and Russel Brand just keeps popping up, and he keeps popping up because he's pretty popular right now, at least in the circle of algorithms that I get, about the fact that he's, a recent convert to Christianity. He's got on.
Is he a Christian now?
Yeah, he's a believer. He had a hilarious.
He's tried everything else.
Hilarious Instagram footage of when Bear Grylls baptized him, and Bear Grylls and another guy, and they went and got baptized. They went and baptized
Bear Grylls
Russell.
Was a Christian.
And as they're baptizing Russell,
bugs.
John, the guy that they're with, cuts open his foot because they're probably in like the Jordan, like they're in like a lake.
Yeah.
And so he gets baptized, and his joke is it took Bear Grylls to baptize him because that's how like lost in the world he was.
That's funny.
And so Bear bounds up the guy's foot that's bleeding profusely, and so they have to go to the ER, and it's just a whole thing. And and Russell says, I watched the entire New Testament unfold in front of me between healing and baptism, and it was just funny. But he has a show on a platform called Rumble. I haven't heard of it yet, but it's all about free speech, and it's all about saying whatever's on your mind, whatever, you go on his show, and it's, I don't know. I'm assuming that's kind of like how Howard Stern was, but it's all, pro.
Except he's Jewish.
But I just don't know.
Like,
I don't know. I
York.
Never listened because, for me growing up, like that
Long
was
Island
like,
stuff.
Rated X, anything Howard Stern. So I'm assuming that's that. So, okay, not to put these two in the same context, but another show,
they both have long hair.
Another episode, another podcast, that I am on, is the Ask Adam podcast through our church, where anonymous people can write into our pastor, those of you who are new, and ask our pastor whatever they want to ask. And I've been given the privilege of being the one to ask him these questions, which he isn't familiar with. He doesn't know the questions before we sit down. It's very much similar to what we do here. Yeah. When I throw a topic and then we talk about it, but we actually have like between 10 to 12 questions per episode.
Yeah.
So we've been doing it for a year. We've grown our subscribers, regular listeners, by quite a bit. And this last time, and Earmuffs Kids, if that's an old school reference, but Earmuffs Kids, the question came up to our pastor, which this one he was actually prepared for. It came to him, and then he told me to ask him online.
Okay.
Is masturbation a sin? And I'm like thinking, wow.
You had to ask him that one, huh?
I asked him that question, and we had a whole conversation about it, and he answered it, and he brought in scripture, and we brought in, points of view. That's not what this episode is about. It's not about answering that.
It's not a whole episode about masturbation.
No, But the point being is like, wow, what an amazing ability to have a format like a podcast where like multiple people
you don't
listen.
get to talk about this on the CBS
where you get
Evening
to
News.
ask
That's
your
for sure.
pastor poignant questions that everybody has. And so today's episode, because of my initial intrigue into this Russel Brand and this concept of like free speech and, never have listening to Howard Stern growing up, but being
I listened to
able
Howard Stern growing up, and he was hilarious.
being able to have open dialogue and have a conversation, and then being able to have a forum with a pastor about things like sin and, questions like masturbation and stuff like that. So what I'd like to talk about today is really about the freedom of speech, about the amendment that we have to be, while we still can, what is this podcast about? We say it's about, it is pretty much about nothing, but it's also about everything. And we try here to make it a family show. We've had our kids on the show. We love the show for what it is. And it is our opinion, which is kind of where I was going with, like last week when I was on that last podcast is, these people don't have to ask us these questions. They can go to Google. They can go to Google and they can get their questions. They want to know our opinion is why they're listening. They want to know our opinion is why they're submitting these questions, whether they're anonymous or by people who say their name. So, anybody, I think, who's tuning into the Jeff Heilman project wants to know what our opinions are. Like, what's our opinions on corporate America? What's our opinions on democracy? What's our opinions on republic? What's our opinions on this and on that? And so what many who aren't watching know is that before Jeff Heilman Extraordinaire became who he is in corporate America and an entrepreneur, you were actually a history major and you loved history.
Still
and
do.
So could you maybe go walk with us through examples of persecutions, just like freedom of speech, what it means to America, what it is. If I were asking, if Jeff was Chat GPT, Chat JCH, like tell us about what you've studied and what anything. Let's just talk about freedom of speech.
History has human life at the center of it. And that might seem like double talk or seem trite, but really history is about life. It's about human life. And then offshoots of that are music and the way that music changes from the Baroque era to the classical era to more of the music that comes into what we would see almost modern classical. Like you would hear Chopin. Chopin could be considered classical music, but it's not from the classical period because classical is a genre, but it's also a period of time. So you have music, you have art that comes as a reflection of human life. You have food, and you have political things that happen throughout life, wars that are fought. If anybody out there likes U.S. history and they like golf at all, and this is not a show about golf, but I was deeply and still am deeply influenced by golf history. The history of golf, which in modern times is really only about 130 years. It was not anywhere in the U.S. Charles Blair Macdonald was the first person who, on his uncle's mandate, who was a member of the Royal and Ancient Golf Club, insisted that his nephew be educated in St. Andrews, Scotland. And so when he went over there, he learns about golf and that it's such a part of the town and the area. And then he comes back and he's like, why aren't we doing this over here? And so he creates the Chicago Golf Club and a bunch of others. There's a golf club in Bermuda called Mid-Ocean Golf Club. And I played it. And coming to find out when I got the shirt and I told my uncle about it, he says, your grandfather played this golf course 50 years ago. The members at Mid-Ocean Golf Club are like Winston Churchill, past presidents. If you look at the board of all the guys that have played in all the member guest tournaments, it's all heads of state and stuff. So it's really interesting. Mm-hmm. But there's a book that I'm reading right now that covers the history of basically 1900 to 1930 with some color commentary going back to the Civil War and then going through World War I and World War II about Bobby Jones and his superstardom. I mean, here you've got, in today's world, golf has become so commoditized that you actually have two major tours that are now warring and kind of splitting the pot on people's attention around the Golf Channel and stuff. And it's interesting in its own right to see which ones broke bad toward the bad tour, which ones stayed loyal to the original PGA Tour, and where's the fighting between those two. And most people have probably about 0.001% interest in something like that. But this is an example of how human life manifested in music, manifested in art, manifested in food, manifested in the public competitions of golf. It's all a reflection of human life. Wars. Why are wars fought? Wars are fought for a bunch of different reasons. They're fought over natural resources. They're fought because people get offended. They're fought because they have spoiled, rotten family dynamics that spread through the aristocracies. Queen Elizabeth, as an example, Queen Elizabeth I's descendants occupied something like royalty positions in 9 different countries leading up to World War I. They were all, that's all one big family feud. And then millions of people end up having to pay a price of their lives in order to fight these battles.
To that point, I think it was Malcolm Gladwell who was writing, I forget, it was one of those books, one of his books where he was talking about how if you drew a line across the United States, northern danger, homicides between the northerners are strangers and homicides between the southerners are familial.
Really?
Like the majority of homicide is through in the southern parts of the states is from person to person within the family or within the you already know the person.
Wow.
And then if you go north, it's all stranger danger. So it's just interesting. But those civil wars between people. But how does what you're saying relate to the freedom of speech or lack thereof? I guess.
Well, I don't know who else has it, but I think we're the main ones that have it. You can't say whatever you want. You can't say, the Queen's a beast or whatever.
Yeah.
In England, they'd throw you in jail for that stuff.
Yeah.
I don't think they necessarily would. It's become more, but they could.
Yeah.
And here they can't. And I think that, amazingly, I think that's why Elon bought Twitter. That's why he pulled billions and billions of dollars together to buy Twitter, is to try to protect free speech, because he did see the left just going hardcore on censoring people. And the truth is it's their platform. So they can do whatever the heck they want. And
they try. I mean, there was a few that kept trying to go, I think, didn't Donald Trump start his own? Like, there were a few different platforms that were trying, but none were certain.
Well, Twitter has the fan base.
Yeah.
Right? Or at least they did. And then we talk about the freedom of speech. The other side of free speech is, if you're borrowing somebody's megaphone, should they be able to say, I want my megaphone back because I don't like what you're blasting through
Well,
it?
I was thinking about that today. It's like,
just because
you
it's your megaphone.
Just because you can say whatever you want doesn't mean that you should
Napoleon
say
Hill,
whatever you want.
Circa 1937, Napoleon Hill talks about in Outwitting the Devil about how one of the major causes of failure from the 20+ thousand people was basically having a big mouth and having unchecked opinions that were just, well, I just think, and that sends shockwaves through the system of people are like, even on this podcast, we try to take a really hard line on success principles. We talk about things that are edgy. In fact, I just ran a ChatGPT prompt to say, hey, why don't you tell me what my show's about, right? Look at all the 300 episodes and shorts that we've published so far, 60 episodes, 240 shorts or so. Why don't you tell me, ChatGPT, what's the spin? And the spin is, we have a couple of characters on the show. We have done some interviews, but all in all, we try to come up with strategies and thoughts that have everything to do with helping you be successful. And do we rant? Sure, we rant. We're human beings. Do we have politically charged opinions? I think we have opinions that tend to draw politically charged responses from people, even though we are not politicians. I don't pretend to be.
No, man, but we are pro-voting. So whatever side you
am
are
pro
on, vote.
Maintaining the freedom that you have to vote.
Exercise your
and
right
if
to
you
vote.
don't use it, you're going to lose it, whether it's the gains or the vote or your bucks or family time or physical health or fitness. Like, you have to keep.
Yeah, if you think about voting like an exchange, just like you think of money as an exchange. If you don't use your money, it's not circulating, and it will eventually, your entire economic structure will fail because you are not exchanging you're not exchanging. You're not participating in that economy. And our economy, regardless of whether anyone wants to admit it or not, our economy is political. It is how all of our we are a law-based
Our form of government is what allows the economy to continue.
Absolutely. And
the peaceful transfer
the surest
of
way
power.
to bring America down is to quit exchanging in the political climate, quit exchanging in the atmosphere of voting, because part of voting, even if I don't want to advocate for just, haphazardly marking X boxes and just sending in your ballot. But you know what? If you don't participate, you're not exchanging. It's not any better than putting money under your mattress and not ever putting it out in the economy. Eventually, you're going to...
Don't put money under your mattress, people.
Eventually you're going to die. Because you won't have any food in the fridge because all your money's underneath your mattress.
That's right. But we have the box guy. Andrew, when you come to the editing portion of this, let's put a picture of the box. There was a guy who was 33 years old, born into slavery in the 1820s, and his wife and 3 children were sold. I can't even imagine that. He basically has nothing left to live for. Was owned by. I mean, let's call it what it is, right? At that time, horrible that occurred in this period, in this country. It's shameful, and it needs to be taught so that people, because it's still going on in a lot of other countries, and it needs to be taught about from a just stoic perspective. But the guy wanted freedom so bad that he saved up his money till he got some little bit of pocket money. And he saved it up for like 2 years or 3 years. In today's dollars, saved up $3,200 and packaged himself in a box that was 60 centimeters across. That's about 3 feet, I think, 2.5 feet. And he sat in that box for a day and a half with a couple of biscuits and some water. It wasn't in a bottle of water with a lid, by the way. And he had himself shipped by private courier or some kind of postal courier that was guaranteed not to look inside the box, from Virginia to an abolitionist state, Pennsylvania. And he went through that, and all the guys that helped him tried to help other slaves get freed that way too. And all of those slaves were captured and arrested. And all of the people that tried to help him afterward, he was the one guy that was able to mail himself to this address for this amount of money. And he spent the next 50 years of his life in freedom. He wanted to put himself in a box to escape so that he could have the right to just do whatever he wanted to do instead of being told, doing what he was told to do. And we have to protect the freedom that people have fought and died and are still fighting and still dying in order to protect our freedom. And I don't think that has to be a political... I think freedom and protecting freedom is so much loftier and ideal in conversation than anything related to one side of the aisle politically or another.
Well, I think that the misnomer is that people... Well, it's not a misnomer. I think the general thought is, well, of course it makes sense, and that should just be the default. So if we just say, screw it, then the default, of course, would be freedom. The default, of course,
Freedom
would be
is not
do
the
whatever you
default.
want to be.
It's not.
It's not, and
It's not the default.
That's the
default is slavery.
reality. The default is slavery. The default is
Either in
if
deed
you
or
are going
in
to be
bond.
under control, or you will be the one putting people under control. But control and
slavery,
being controlled is the default.
If we look at slavery not from an 1860s perspective, but modern slavery, slave to our phones, slave to our jobs, slave to our creditors. If your attention is not able to go where you want it to go, are you really free? Are you really free if you spend 6 to 8 hours a day on your screens? And I'm starting to really push back and say, look, if the content is not the very best, there's so much exceptional content out there. We will never even hear in our lifetime of all the content creators that are making great stuff out there. We won't even hear about 1/100th of 1% of the very best. There's so much available out there. And so if there's 50 people or 100 people that are watching this episode, awesome. I think it's great. I hope we're adding the kind of value that makes you laugh and makes you think about your life and question your decision-making process so that you can improve every aspect of what you're doing. But I am not on my phone. I'm reading paper books. I'm going to bed early. I'm writing stuff on a notepad.
That's a good question. Let me ask you about this. There are a lot of very successful YouTubers that make a lot of money because they partner with sponsors and they get paid. They get to a point to where they're so big that they have to produce a video once a month. Yep. That's by a part of their contract. They have to mention the sponsor. That's another part of their contract. Here's the question. One of the YouTubers that we watch regularly, the kids and I, that we really enjoy, he was in danger of being canceled because he got so much flack and so much hate because he had a Starbucks cup in the background of one of his videos. And at the time, people were very offended at Starbucks because of something that they did.
They're offended at Starbucks, or they were just offended?
No, they're offended, but they're
Starbucks
offended at...
Starbucks was in full support of Israel.
Yeah, and so whether we're pro-Palestine or pro-Israel, I'm just saying, and he's Jewish.
Howard Schultz is Jewish.
So,
why would that be
this relatively innocent content creator has a cup of Starbucks in the video in the back.
Yeah.
Feels compelled to have to actually apologize for being insensitive.
Was he being insensitive?
No, it's just in the background. But enough people were, dropping, and he's got sponsors and he's got responsibilities. Yeah. So at that point,
cater to your audience.
Has becoming is that a job? Is this now slavery that he has to, or that you feel like you have to change your content or morph your content or apologize for something that you were innocently trying, because he's got responsibilities.
To that is,
are we ever what if we got so big to where we have to apologize for saying something that we said?
I don't think we have to be big. I'll apologize in advance. Hey, if I say something that offends you, I'm not trying to be offensive. I'm trying to offer up alternatives to mainstream media in order to encourage people to think for themselves. And that'll be my position till the day I die. But I want to do it with the right heart, right? We want to do it with the right heart. We don't want to offend anybody.
No.
But
let's say, for example, that your Starbucks cup, which I see right there, or Dasani or whatever is there, and
it's a Starbucks coffee cup.
And you've got a sponsor who's saying, Jeff, you've really gotten we like you. We've gotten really accustomed to sending you these $20,000 checks a week, but we really need you to apologize for having that cup on the screen in your next episode.
If my sponsor wanted me to apologize for having a cup on the screen that they disagreed with or that offended somebody, I would consider it. I would have to. Because at the end of the day, we're about bringing people together. We're about connecting people. Now, I'm not trying to be offensive by having a coffee cup from Starbucks. And also we have to allow people the right to be offended. Mm-hmm. I do not want to try to remove somebody's freedom to go off into the dark blue yonder and be as offended as they want to be. My job is not to try to keep people from being offended. That said, if we're doing stuff that's offensive and our heart's not right, then we have to look at that.
So wouldn't you think that if you're in a situation to where you're going to work to uphold freedom of speech and feel comfortable, have your guests feel comfortable to say whatever they want whenever they want to say it,
Yeah.
then I would suppose that your only retort would be, number one, be ready to have your platform taken away at any point in time.
Yeah.
And number two, don't ever allow your main source of income to be from a platform that could potentially be taken away at any point in time.
Yeah, I'd say deplatforming is probably it's got to be part of your strategy.
Multi-variable, multi-platforms, more than just one. Yeah, it's just interesting because, I wrote my first book, everybody, and I'll let you know when it's out. It's being edited right now. But the topic of the book, it's not a Christian book necessarily. It's an encouragement book.
It's a book by a Christian.
It's a book written by a Christian, but it's not for a Christian audience. There's no scripture in it. But the concept, the conversation of the first book is peace. And it was really difficult for me because as a believer, the initial response as a pastor and as a believer is just to say, oh, I'll just go get Jesus. And I know we have Jewish people that watch. Hi, Marcia. And she, and so for me, when I talk to Marcia and I hang out with Marcia and we talk about things, I'm not going to be talking about the Messiah. I'm not going to be talking about Jesus. I have to change I have to come with an encouraging word.
That's just respect. We're just being respectful.
And not...
Because not everybody wants to cover... I have a friend of mine. Let me pause for just a second.
Sure,
on that.
no problem.
We have a mutual friend who is mentored by a very high-profile person in the Christian realm, who will remain nameless only because it doesn't matter who it actually was. But this person was invited to a presidential prayer breakfast. I know you know the story. And Colin Powell was at that presidential prayer breakfast, and our person of interest was attending, and was asked to give the blessing, and I think he took it too far. This person, and Colin Powell came over and basically said, "You're an honored guest here to perform a service at the request of the President of the United States, and not everybody at this table shares these same beliefs." And it was like it was a bit of a smackdown, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
But it was done in a very
I think
professional and kind way. And our guest took the hint and was like, okay, I understand the point of view, right? And so I think when we look at freedom of speech and we look at influence, I think, do we have the freedom to say whatever the thing we want to say? We have the freedom to do it. That's true. That is a legal right protected by the First Amendment. Sorry, Second Amendment's for guns.
Yeah, that's a whole other episode. No,
First Amendment. It's a First Amendment right. I just want to make sure I'm getting my U.S. history right. It's a First Amendment right. It's a freedom of speech. That is freedom. However, influence is seed sowing.
Yeah.
And that which you sow, so shall you also reap. So,
so for me, writing this book on peace, I had to think out of the box. We talk a lot about that on the show, about how do I not remove Christ as the peace, because we as believers have all come to understand He's the peace that passes. We have all of these scriptural knowledge as to Christ being peace, but how am I going to talk to everybody about peace? How am I going to talk to everybody, those who know Him, those who don't know Him, those who don't believe in Him, those who hate Him, about peace? And at the end of the book that I had written together, the arc is freedom. When you have freedom, you have peace. They go hand in hand. So if you can get yourself freed up financially, you'll have peace. When you can live peacefully, if you want to live peacefully with others, you will have freedom. Freedom is to peace of mind, as whatever you can think of is to love, or, they go hand in hand. And so being able to write this book and being able to say to others, okay, so you have to overcome anxiety, stress, and fear because you do not have peace. Well, this is what we're going to do. We're going to work for the next period of pages on getting you free. Because when you can get free, then you can be freed up
Yeah,
in mind.
and you got to be free
and
in
you can
mind.
have
You have to
peace.
be free in mind before you can be free in body.
Yeah.
You have to be.
You have to be. And that was I
you
was
could
doing
be
a lot of
free in your mind and be in jail
100%. I was
and
doing
still
research,
experience.
and I was researching like Gandhi, and I was researching Mother Teresa, and I'm researching all of these people, the Dalai Lama, about how inner peace, you know, peace over yourself. Until you have that, you will never be able to have peace.
That's right.
As an impact to others.
That's right.
You know, your words, with the freedom of speech that you have, if you do not have inner peace, those words that come out of your mouth are going to get you into trouble. They're not going to be words flowing with peace at the core of them. They're going to be words that are going to probably get you into more trouble than what you're looking to achieve by saying them. And so just really interesting, the theme recently for me about, you know, freedom of speech, peace, all of these things that we've been personally going through this month of declaring and looking at the declarations of our tongue and stuff that we're making. So it just really impressed upon me this episode to talk about freedom of speech and what it means.
Well,
The interesting thing about the freedom of speech is that it can be an abuse of power.
Absolutely.
There is such thing as if you don't use it, you're gonna lose it. And such thing as if you abuse it.
if you abuse it, you're going to lose it, or it'll be taken from you. That's right.
And it's not. I don't think this whole country is freedom of speech. I think if you go outside in your backyard, you have the freedom of speech. But there are terms and services of most media platforms that say this is what you can or cannot do, and most restaurants you can or cannot say certain things. And you know,
I know you
other
can't talk about
neighborhoods.
bombs at the airport.
Yeah,
No,
so
you
there
better not say bomb on a plane.
You
That's
better
for
not
sure.
say bomb on a plane.
we do have limitations, and it is not a backwoods do whatever you want country anymore. It probably was that in the first 100 years of its
But
foundation.
I think that if you go,
we're a lot more sensitive to other cultures and other races because we have
Absolutely.
such a high foreign
well,
population.
you're going to lose your career, right? You're going to lose your job source. But
You've
I
gotta
think
be-
that at the end of the day, you can still go into the court of law in front of a judge, and you can not plead the fifth, but you can have a compelling argument about your freedom of speech. And
Somebody legally taking legal action against you because of what you say, as long as it's not slander, libel.
Yeah.
Like you can defame somebody's character and talk smack about them, and then
you can
because
be
of
charged
that,
restitution.
yeah, you could be charged for there.
you
but
can lie about somebody that something did and be charged for that.
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
right. That's right. But as far as like, hey, I have an opinion,
Yeah,
and but think about that. Like, you can't have an opinion
no.
and speak it publicly in
China, mainland
many
China,
countries. Russia, they shoot you.
Mm-hmm.
China, they shoot you. Under Saddam Hussein in Iran, they shoot you. Under the fascist regime in Cuba under Castro, they shoot you. Like they don't. Napoleon, one of his famous quotes I was reading when the Napoleon movie came out. I was reading, what did Napoleon say about Napoleon? Yeah, I was interested. And he said, somebody asked him, what do you do with men who think? And he says, we shoot them. We're not paying you to think. We're paying you to go out there in the battle and fight.
We're paying you to die.
We're paying you to die. And he killed more soldiers than any man in the last 500 years in command.
Of
He
his
killed
own soldiers.
3 million soldiers died under his command, fighting those battles that, for the most part, were an expanse of his ego.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, that goes back to what Andrew was talking about, like the ramifications of abuse of power. So I think that words are really important. They used to say sticks and stones can hurt my bones, but names will never hurt me. And I think that names can hurt. I think that people whose words, you have a choice. You can heal, you can bless, you can be kind, you can be nice and gentle and speak life.
Mm-hmm.
Bible says life and death is in the power of the tongue, and they that love it shall eat the fruit thereof. And that word fruit it means it's the manifestation of either the positive or the negative side of it. And I was talking with Washington last night. We go do our little midnight donut run every once in a while. which is probably like
It's
3
funny
times
because
this
I
week.
took him during the day the other day, and he's like, "Oh, the donuts don't look like they do at night. At night, the racks are all full, and they're hot, they're fresh.
Set up for the morning.
We walked in, and there were like no donuts, just the ones in the case, and he's like, "Ew, it's cold."
Oh, yeah, not the same.
Not
That's
the same.
funny.
Mom donuts are not dad donuts. Dad donuts happen at 1 o'clock in the morning. Mom's donuts happen at
That's
1 in
funny.
the afternoon.
Yeah. I was talking about your dad and the impact that Dan has had on me personally as somebody who is always positive. But not like zany over the top positive.
Not car salesman positive.
No. He's in sales, but he's the most polished, chill, but he's always got a sense of positive and uplifting and tries to be encouraging and make people feel good. And he's, my dad, my stepdad was not like, neither of those guys were like that. My uncle's kind of Mark more than Kurt. My grandfather, he was positive some of the time, but he also had this super dark, cynical.
It's like, you're positively screwing up. Did you know that?
Yeah. Did you know you're positively screwing up? Yeah. And my grandfather
You're
would
failing
become
awesome.
so offended at stuff. But Dan, not so much. I've always seen Dan as very, very, very stable and was a stabilizing force in my life to say, man, you really can be positive and encouraging like all the time or mostly all the time. So to me, even though you have freedom of speech, it does not mean you have freedom from responsibility of what those words do after you say them, which is why we try not to play the politics card or the race card at all on this. It's not that we don't want to talk about it. It's just we know it's a charged subject. And a lot of people have a lot of strong opinions about it. So we just try to say, hey, post, tell us about your comments, tell us about what you think or what you feel about things. And then we try to represent history. But we don't have Black History Day on the Jeff Heilman Project. We just talk about history, and it happens to include Jews, and it happens to include people from Iran, and it happens to include people that are Black or people of color that, identify as a different race, Hispanic or Asian or what have you. But that at the end of the day, the human experience is the thing that brings us all together, that everybody knows what it's like to be marginalized. And somebody could say, well, how would you know what it's like to be marginalized as a 50-year-old white guy?
Poverty knows no nationality.
That's a very racist thing for somebody to think, like that how could I possibly experience those same emotions of being marginalized?
The only reason why I bring up poverty is because we didn't have a pos to piss in when we were.
I didn't have a pos or a pot.
We couldn't play any card because we had no cards to play with. And so like if you say like how could you know what it means to be in pain, the pain factor is starvation for us.
The pain factor is being fired, laid off, or going out of business 30 times.
Yeah.
That's 30 with a 3-0, by the way, ladies and gentlemen. Yeah, I have not always been received as the superstar salesperson in my companies, and I've offended a lot of people and taken strong positions of faith and strong positions of doing what's right, and moral authority has been my friend for many years, and for some reason that's offensive to people. I guess people like doing wrong or don't like being outed as somebody who does. I just like, why don't you just do what's right?
Well, I loved what we were listening to recently, and he said,
right
the guy we were listening to said, you want to know your surest way of losing your job, be exceptional at it.
Oh, I love that. Yeah, Erwin McManus was doing a podcast talking about. He says he's not too sure about people that haven't been fired 2 or 3 times because he doesn't know if you're like really believe in anything. Yeah. And I can tell you,
want to keep your job, stay average.
Yeah, if you want to keep your job, stay average. And so I would say, I would like to actually pay homage to that podcast on this and say, if there's anybody out here who's ever been fired, laid off, gone out of business, managed out, we're not picking up your options, pink slip, going another direction, reorg, restructure, or anything else, any other way of saying we ain't going to pay you no more money. I just want you to know that chances are it's because you're trying to do something in an exceptional way. And we feel you. And we have been in that situation before. Even up to and related to jobs within the most recent past, which the company, to remain kind to my former employers. Shall remain nameless, but yeah, within the last 5 years, I've had a manager after I closed a monster deal tell me that he said everybody all the way up to the top of our organization thinks you don't have what it takes to be an account manager at this company. I'm like, well, that's funny. You should have told me that before I closed the biggest deal on the team. And
but what he was really saying is, you're really making me look bad, and the more you keep doing that, the more we're going to either have to start working, or we're not going to have our own jobs anymore.
Yeah, I don't understand.
And that was the point of Erwin's podcast, was like, if you want to maintain your job, just blend in, be average.
Yeah, blend in and be average. So, and that's what I would say. If you're going through that kind of stuff at work and you're feeling a little spicy, try to blend in. Just be nice. You know, be a good house guest, like the guy says to Sinbad in the movie, right? Just be a good house guest, because that's what you are in somebody's company. And I think there is something to be said for being an amiable, kind person inside of a company and being a good house guest.
Or just be willing to just continue to get fired over and over again.
I have been willing to take a hard line on doing what's right, leading up to and including being fired, laid off, gone out of business, managed out, reorg, restructure, pink slip, not picking up your options, going another direction. I've been fired more ways than I can say. But I've always been trying to do the right thing. I've been trying to do my best, and I've been trying to say, okay, if the average person works 40 hours a week and I work 100 hours a week, then I'm going to get a bigger yield from my days and months than the average person, and that will set me apart.
Because case point, it's never been about performance. It's never been, oh, Jeff, you don't show up. Oh, Jeff, you know, we gave you these meetings.
Don't take vacations.
You know, you don't close deals. No, you close the biggest deals. You show up. You're early to meetings.
Make the most money.
As a matter of fact, if you get in trouble for missing a meeting, it's because you had 3 other meetings. I mean, it's never about performance. It's always about being exceptional and about making other people look bad. And so, like,
which I don't even understand. Like, because when I sucked, I just wanted to get better. So I would look at the guys and the gals that were doing an exceptional job. I remember there was a sales rep, there was a woman who was a sales rep who was making about $2 million a year at a channel partner at Cisco one time. And I literally said, what do you do? How do you think? What do what kind of calculator do you use? I told her, I was like, I'll wear high heels and lipstick if it helps me close more business. Like, I would know. I would do. You never know, right? That and changing your pronouns, right? I would do anything. I would do anything to become better at what I was doing, as long as it was honest.
Okay, except
and
become
mostly
average.
Legal. Yeah, except slide off the cliff into the sea of mediocrity.
Yeah.
And to me, that just makes my stomach turn. But I guess some people, when you talk about mediocrity, they think I'm talking about them, and I'm not talking about them at all, or they, or whatever. I'm talking about there's a miss that we have in this country. When you look at the Social Security Administration statistics for how people end up, we live in the richest country in the history of all humanity. It could not be any. I mean, if you live in America and speak English, like, how much luckier could you possibly be, male or female, to be 1 out of 16 people on planet Earth born into this country, and to be able to speak English as your primary language? Like, it's not going to get any easier. You've already won the lottery. And yet, out of the people born in America who speak English, out of every 100 people since the beginning of time in this country, 1 person out of 100 will be rich at the age of 65. 4 people will be well enough off that they can sustain themselves at some form of a passive income level. Something like 35 or 40% will not make it to age 65, unfortunately. And the other 55%, the remainder of everybody outside of those top 5%, will be broke, still working, or dependent on friends, neighbors, relatives, or the government for their basic food, clothing, and shelter after 50 years of working in the richest country in the history of the world. That is that is an epic fail. And yet that statistic has never changed in 200 plus years of history in this country. Why? it's not hard to
I think they're
focus
coming.
your
They're
attention
coming,
and
they're
become
coming
financially
up
independent.
against inflation. Like there are a lot of there's pressure. There's pressure coming from all sides, and that's why we talk so much about mental toughness. That's why we talk so much about rest. Hey, I was just getting on you today saying you need to go take a nap.
I took a nap.
Take a nap.
I took a nap.
You are going down.
listened to my
You're
wife.
going down the dark and scary road, and you need to go take a nap. Go take a nap and feel better.
I grabbed my whoopee and
Yeah.
I turned the air conditioner on, and
Pressure will drive us to the point to where, like Benjamin Franklin said, most people die before they're dead.
yeah, most men die at age 26. Unfortunately, they're
they-
not buried until 62.
Exactly. So your dreams, everything dies with you because by the time you're 65, the pressure cooker has cooked you, and you're cooked, and then you just live out the rest of your life in an easy chair. If you're rich enough, you get to live in your lazy boy till you keel over and watch TV.
Yeah.
Or you did so why do you the whole point of this podcast, the whole point of personal growth and books that you read and encouraging you to read and grow and continue to grow is that you want to be able to have survived through the pressure cooker by the time you're in your 60s and you can begin to do things that like you're free to be able to do and be able to have the body and the energy and the, hey, I've survived the pressure cooker and these are now the best years of my life ahead of me instead of just become beaten down by the world. It's really not a factor of money. If you're watching this short right now, because I said money like 5 times, stop watching the show, go do something.
Yeah.
Because,
or do something while you listen to the show.
Yeah, doing something to advance your personal self, that inner peace, that growth mindset.
Jessica and I lived on about $800 a month when we first got married. I think I made $800 a month, and I think you made maybe three or 500, somewhere in there. We lived on less than $2,000 a month until I was 30, on the average. My W-2, the last year before we kind of hit it big, I was 28 years old, and we made $21,500 with 3 kids, living in
I
an
remember
apartment.
the tax guy saying, "How'd you live?
How did you go
Oh."
from $2,000 a month to $350,000, $400,000 in a year? And I'm like, I don't know.
Well,
I don't know. We just worked and continued to double down on getting our mind right by meditating in the Word and reading the right kinds of books.
personal growth.
But 9 years of poverty. And I remember looking back, like I'm kind of scratching my head going, I don't even know. We didn't even know we were poor. That's when it's almost like, how could you not know you're poor? Like I knew I was not like stellar performer, but I remember asking myself, like, what was the poverty line? It was actually double what we were making. We lived on half the poverty line for 9 years. And so that, if people talk about white privilege, yep, I was privileged to live on half the poverty line for 10 years and experience what it was like to go without anything.
I think
other
that,
than
this
electricity.
podcast is getting long and I know we need to start wrapping it up, but I think a big
Is
key
that your way of
factor.
telling me that I'm talking about topics that are outside the realm?
No, we can talk whatever. This is what this whole episode is about. I just know that we're like, I'm looking at Andrew and he's giving me the cues. That the fortunate aspect of the way I think that we could live is that we were young enough that we were still dreamers. And then also, you and I were raised by our Great Depression surviving grandparents.
Yeah.
And because both of our parents were of a generation that worked full time. And so we took with us a resourceful mentality from, the Great Depression and having to come through that and be resourceful of our grandparents who are the major leading influences of our lives. And then our youth of being able to dream. And so we didn't feel like we were going without living on half. We felt like this is an opportunity to be creative, like be like our our grandparents would have never told us, like if we said, "Oh, there's no food to eat and there's potatoes on the counter," they'd be like, "You got potatoes." And I remember being a dreamer going, all we got to eat, all I got to feed my kids is potatoes, but it's not always going to be this way. But I know how to cook a potato. And so that's kind of you got to take that mentality of that resourcefulness, being creative. This is an opportunity that we have to be creative and back it up with the dream. This isn't where we're going to be long term. This is only temporary. I know how I'm thankful I got my potato. I'm going to eat my potato, but my potato, when I take a bite, man, doesn't it taste like filet mignon? And I'm dreaming about this potato morphing into a filet mignon in my mouth. And I know that one day it's coming, but it's just not here yet. And so.
Thanks for being with us, everybody. This is the Jeff Heilman podcast. Happy to have you with us.
Cut me off.
And Jessica and I are grateful to have you with us. Have a great rest of your day. Thanks.
Bye.